Hey everybody, did you know you can go to colinmullen.com in order to get art and art prints like the picture you're about to see? That'll be on there. You can buy it with money and it'll be at your doorstep and the mailman will hand it to you and be like, man, you're so cool. Give me a high five. colinmullen.com. Is that really what I'm going with? So hey everybody, before we get into today's subject matter, I want to talk about this painting first. Like I said, it'll be on colinmullen.com if you want to get it. But I asked the people on patreon.com/RevScarecrow via a poll, what do you guys want to see me paint next? And Yakuza won first, and then this one won second. So this is Dark Souls 3. It's of the chapel in the Ashes of Arundel DLC. I don't remember how to pronounce that. I'm sorry. I'm painfully dyslexic and it makes me stupid sometimes. It's in the chapel of the same name. Let's go with that. And it's right above Sister Fried? I don't know how to pronounce her name either. I have no idea what's going on in the story in Dark Souls. I'll be honest with you. But I just thought this area was pretty. And it's part of the painted world, which I think is like fitting. It's also got like a canvas. I'm sure there's some real deep lore reason why it's there. Dark Souls lore has always evaded me. It feels like it is intentionally just impossible to understand. But anyway, let's talk about today's subject matter. Let's try and work through this idea. I mean, obviously with a channel name like Artcade, I already have my opinion, but I'm going to try and argue it and try and explain why it's the case. So I believe that video games are art, but I've also described what my opinion or what it requires to be art in a lot of ways, or what the function of art is. But I feel like we need to determine what is and is not art first, and then we can determine whether or not video games can possibly meet that standard. A lot of people believe that art has to be of certain media. For example, art cannot be anything but paint on canvas and statues. And to them, video games will never be art. That's just the nature of the beast. If you believe it has to be a certain media, then video games will never meet that media because it's inherently going to be a digital format. But I don't feel like that's a good way of determining whether or not something is or is not art. If all we're going off of is whether or not it can be painted onto a canvas, then that's not going to do you any good. It's better to determine it based on other factors. And I think we can see through the history of art as a concept in fine art that there have been plenty of times where it hasn't been paint on canvas. It hasn't even been a physical, tangible thing. Performance art and that kind of thing tells us that, like, people are fine with something being a momentary flash in the pan thing that happens. It doesn't have a physical form. There was recently an artist who put a seesaw connecting both sides of the border wall here in the United States, and people called that art. Is a seesaw art? Yeah, I think most people would consider that art. And so what makes video games not art? And to me, it seems obvious that they are. But I think we also need to understand that art can be a lot of things. Art doesn't have to be art with a capital A. Art can also be, you know, the logo for a Coca-Cola is art. But I think very few people are going to have an emotional response to it. It's art made for the purpose of selling you a thing. I don't know why Cokes are always my go-to on stuff. Probably says something about how many Cokes I drink in a day. But anyway, so with that understanding that, like, art, you know, can be just something that's painted onto the side of a tin or used to advertise, I think we have the whole spectrum of what video games as art could be. You've got stuff like your Call of Duties that aren't really, you know, maybe the earlier ones did, but nowadays they don't really have like the emotional impact or really talk about things. And do you need that to be art? Like, do you need to hit an emotional chord in order to be considered art? Not really, in my opinion. You just need to be saying something, like I said in the last video. So let's talk about today's subject matter. Are video games art? I think if you're clicking on a channel that's called Artcade and I'm painting a picture from a video game, you're gonna kind of understand that I probably am slanted in my opinion. Yes, I believe that video games are art, and sometimes capital A art. The difference being a Coca-Cola can versus like the Mona Lisa. There are some games that are like not really meant to have the emotional pull that we normally consider art to be. The capital A art, as like people in art history would have it referred to. I don't see a huge difference in what makes a video game artistic and what makes other media artistic. If the qualification to become art is that it has to be sculpture or paintings, then a lot of genres, a lot of things are not art. For example, recently an artist put a seesaw connecting the border in America to Mexico, and all it is a seesaw that children can play on. And yet that's considered art because of its contextual nature and everything that's going on with immigration policy and that kind of thing right now. Like, we consider that art. It's a seesaw, though. Like, that's it. It's just a seesaw. It's just in a very specific location that makes it important, and that's what gives it that art. That thing that makes it feel like art rather than just a piece of playground equipment. And so if a seesaw can be art, if a video can be art, if videos can be art, and at the same time we can have something like the Avengers, which, you know, I don't know how much of an emotional impact it really has. I've never really been into superhero movies. I guess that's an aside. But my point is that, like, it's not... Video can be used in multiple different ways. Seesaws can be used in multiple different ways. The media does not really make it art or not art. It's how it's used and whether or not it's being used in such a way as to achieve to be art, right? So in that way, are video games art? Sometimes when they're intending to be. But I feel like, and this is a bit of an aside, I feel like the full potential as video games as art has yet to be achieved. I feel like the games that are artistic, that we consider art, that most people in the video game community consider are art, a lot of them fall short of achieving their full potential because they don't see themselves as video games. They see themselves as interactive experiences. And that may seem like an aside, I guess it is, but my point is that, like, a sculpture uses the fact that it's three-dimensional in order to really give off the full use of sculpture. A painting uses the fact that you view it from perhaps one angle in order to be, you know, good. That makes it useful in the way that its function is. Like, paintings function in a certain way because of how you're expected to look at them. And so I feel like the expected experience of whatever media you use should be used to its full potential. Else, why are you using it over another one? A lot of these interactive experiences, I feel like, could easily just be videos that are just, you don't get to do much and you just sort of watch and it does its thing and then it's over. I feel like a really good video game as art would be a game that makes you feel the thing by making you have to experience it. Spec Ops: The Line is genuinely a good example of that, and one that's brought up a lot when this debate comes up, because it integrates what it's trying to tell you through its narrative with the gameplay. You have to do things that you're uncomfortable with doing, and it works better as such. But in the simple question, are video games art? Yes. But I don't feel like that they've met that full potential yet, except for a handful of exceptions, Dark Souls being one of them, being that the feeling is that it's supposed to feel dreary and awful, and everything is out to kill you, and everything is bad, and the world is ending, and it feels like it. And so, like I said at the start of this, you know, yeah, I feel like Dark Souls is one of those games that really becomes art. But anyway, I'm rambling a bit now, so let me know what you think in the comments, whether or not you think video games are art, and why they're not if they're not, and why they are if they are. But anyway, let's thank the people on Patreon who make this whole thing that I'm doing here possible. And if you want to join them, like I said, $5 or more gets you in the credits. There are other tiers. Just go to patreon.com/RevScarecrow. The link is in the description so you can get to it nice and easy. But I digress. Let's start with the thanking. Starting with Wapfu. Thank you, Wapfu. Thank you, Theodore Corbier. Thank you, Spiral. Thank you, Spencer Kane. Thank you, Punkster. Thank you, Flenixia Theoren. Thank you, Oboist Kirby. Thank you, and I'm going to mess this up and I'm very sorry, Nicholas Perazine. Am I getting that right? Let me know. Thank you, Micah. Thank you, Maliciousness. Thank you, Lost Nevada. Thank you, Kayla Hollinger. Thank you, Geizozan. Thank you, Duxu. Thank you, Cappy Rose. Thank you, Bubba Fair. Thank you, Pep. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Adam Kearney. And thank you, Ants! I feel like that's the only way I can actually say your name. If that's wrong, let me know. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was informative and not just me rambling like it usually is. But if you liked it, give me a sub. Ring the bell, all of that jazz that people tell you to every single time. But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.